Hey, why won't either of you answer me? I cried as I pleaded with my husband and daughter. It had been a month since they started ignoring me. My heart had reached its breaking point. I didn't know what started it. By the time I realized I was being ignored by my husband and daughter, my presence in our home was non-existent, as if I was invisible. Hey, Dad, did you hear something? Not really, must be your imagination. My daughter and husband kept bullying me like that. Even though my voice was clearly audible and I was in plain sight, they treated me as if I was non-existent. I couldn't take it anymore, so I decided to run away from home. 5 years later, my revenge was achieved in an unexpected way. My name is Natalie Smith. I'm 50 years old. I was just an ordinary stay-at-home mom living with my husband and daughter. I married Jackson, my husband, 23 years ago. We were both 27 and colleagues at the same company back then. We were working in IT with a decent income. We lived comfortably without worrying about money. When I turned 30, we had our daughter, Ruby. She was born healthy and grew up healthy without any major illnesses. I became a stay-at-home mom when Ruby was born. I was planning to return to work after a year of maternity leave, but Jackson refused. Natalie, you don't need to go back to work. Why is that? I think I should work considering Ruby's future. You know my salary is good, right? I can support you and Ruby on my own. But isn't it better to save up? We've both worked hard and saved plenty, right? I want you to just focus on our daughter and things at home. Well, after many discussions, I decided to quit my job. That marked the beginning of my days filled with parenting and household chores. To be honest, until Lena was born, I had no idea how hard parenting could be. The constant sleep deprivation due to feeding every few hours left me dazed with no appetite, but I had to keep up nutrition for Ruby's sake. Perfecting household chores on top of that was quite challenging. I tried to finish the household chores while Ruby was asleep, but mostly due to lack of sleep, I'd end up sleeping alongside her. Jackson wasn't completely unhelpful, but he wasn't exactly eager to cooperate either. He'd only take care of Ruby when she was in a good mood and hand her off to me as soon as she started crying. And so the days went on. In the blink of an eye, Ruby turned 16. After her sweet 16 party, she said something to me. Hey Mom, I didn't have a photographer for my party, right? Well, you didn't want to rent a dress, so we ended up buying a new one, remember? That's why we didn't have a photographer. What? Why not? All my friends had one. I mean, you can't hire a photographer for free, you know. That shouldn't matter to me as a kid. Isn't that something parents should handle? Just then, Jackson came home from work. Noticing the tense atmosphere, he asked, "What's going on?" Ruby said in a whiny voice, "Listen, Dad, all my friends had a photographer for their sweet 16 parties, and I was the only one who didn't. And Mom's making excuses, saying it's because I didn't want to rent a dress." Is that what was said? Of course you'd want one if all your friends had it. Exactly. I knew you'd understand, Dad. I'll hire a photographer for you to have a photo shoot in your dress. I'll cover the costs. Really? Thank you, Dad. I love you. Ruby turned to me, snorted, and walked out of the living room. I couldn't help but confront Jackson, who was all too willing to spoil Ruby. Hold on a minute. Why do you decide things like that on your own? Why? What's the big deal? It's just pictures. Just pictures. Do you have any idea how much it costs to get those photos taken? It would be over $1,000. It can't be helped. Ruby wants to do it. Besides, shouldn't you be the one to pay for that? Shocked by Jackson's unexpected suggestion, I blurted out, "What?" He then said sarcastically, "I'm the one providing for the family, you know. You don't contribute to the living expenses." That's true, but since Ruby was born, most of her necessities have been paid from my savings. Shut up. You just do as I say. What do you mean? I'm not the maid of this house. Then leave. How are you going to survive now, being jobless? With a mischievous grin, Jackson would say such things. As frustrating as it was, what he said wasn't entirely wrong. Even after Ruby grew up, Jackson kept finding reasons to make me give up on going back to work. So I was still without an income. My savings, which were close to $100,000 when we got married, had dwindled to under $20,000. If I left the house now, living on my own would be difficult. That thought silenced me. I bit my lower lip as Jackson triumphantly told me, "You can't live without me. Understand? Now do as you're told, okay? Don't talk back to me ever again. Make sure you hire a photographer for Ruby's photo shoot, okay?" Yes. He discarded his suit and headed straight for the bathroom. As I hung up his suit, anger began to bubble within me. What was that all about? How much more would Ruby and Jackson belittle me? I never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom forever. After much thought, I decided to start working from home for just-in-case scenarios. Jackson said, "Do whatever you want," so I started working a job that would fit within our tax bracket. The photo shoot for Ruby ended up costing $1,500. She insisted on getting the largest printed picture and requested all the photo data, hence the price. Looking at the printed picture, Ruby exclaimed, I look terrible in this. I'm way cuter than that." Don't say that. The photographer really put in the effort to take this shot for you. Maybe it was that studio's fault in the first place, right? It's on you, Mom, for picking that place. What? It was the only place available on the day you were free. Stop making excuses. I don't think I'll ever look at this picture again, so just put it away somewhere. What do you mean? I muttered, my voice quivering with anger and sorrow, feeling like I was about to yell at her. But as a mother, I thought I shouldn't get emotional at times like this. I took a deep breath to calm myself, holding back tears as I went to the kitchen. But I hadn't realized it yet. The real hell was yet to come. The next day, I prepared breakfast as usual, but Jackson and Ruby never came down. Just as I was about to go up and check on them, I heard them chatting and coming down the stairs. "Hey, Dad, where are we going for breakfast?" How about that cafe in front of the station? I heard their breakfasts are famous." "Oh, I want to go there." "All right, let's go then." They put on their shoes and opened the front door. Confused, I blurted out, "Hold on a second, your breakfast is ready." "Do you hear me? Breakfast is ready. Ruby, let's go." The front door slammed shut, and their cheerful voices faded into the distance. I couldn't understand what was happening, but one thing was certain. I had been ignored by Jackson and Ruby. And it wasn't just once. No matter how many times I called out, I was ignored. What was going on? They couldn't have just not heard me, right? Why would both of them do such a thing? Suddenly, I thought it might be a whim, but I was too naive. That evening, they returned home at the same time. They had gone out for dinner together, paying no mind to the dishes I had laid out. Each went straight to their own rooms. The next day and the day after that, the same pattern continued, and my heart was steadily breaking. A month had passed since they started ignoring me. Not only was there no change in Jackson and Ruby's behavior, but that day, completed divorce documents were placed in the living room. "What's this supposed to mean?" I asked Jackson, but as usual, I was completely ignored. They were both happily eating pizza and watching a movie. That's when it hit me. The complex emotions I had been holding back reached their limit. In a panic, I managed to speak up. "Hey, why? Why aren't you both answering me?" Tears streamed down my face as I pleaded for an answer, but there was no reply. They just kept laughing and watching the movie, ignoring me completely. I didn't know what had triggered this. By the time I realized it, I was being ignored by my husband and daughter. You were supposed to be my family. In our home, my presence was non-existent, as if I was invisible. Hey, Dad, did you hear something? Not really, must be your imagination. They kept bullying me like that. Even though my voice was clearly audible and I was in plain sight, they treated me as if I was non-existent. I couldn't take it anymore. Clutching the divorce documents, I packed the bare necessities into my carry-on and left the house without a word. I headed to my parents' house about an hour away by train. Thankfully, my parents are still alive and enjoying their retired life. They were shocked to see me turn up out of the blue with big luggage. But they welcomed me with open arms. Once I explained the situation, my parents were very understanding. I see you've had it rough. Sorry we didn't notice. Nay, tall. It must have been hard. You can stay here until you feel settled, okay? My parents' kind words made me cry. That day, for the first time in decades, I cried my heart out. The next day, I filed the divorce documents and went back to using my maiden name, switching from Smith to Adams. I felt a twinge of loneliness, but managed to calm my emotions. Then I began job hunting. It was quite a daunting task. I had left work at 30 and had a 20-year gap in my employment history. Now at 50, I wondered if there was a place for me in the workforce. However, to my gratitude, I got hired on the spot by the first company I applied to. They hired me because the company I used to work for is well known. Soon I was entrusted with work. 5 years later, I had gotten the hang of my job and was now handling key responsibilities. I had also started training new employees 3 years ago, and in particular, I built a good relationship with a male colleague named Harris. He was the same age as Ruby, so I could relate to him like a son. Conversely, his mom was about my age, and we hit it off, talking about everything from work to personal stuff. Harris was in his 3rd year with the company. One day, he handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked casually, and he replied with a shy grin. "I'm getting married, and I really want you to come to my wedding." "Well, congratulations. I'd love to attend." "Great, thank you." When I got home and looked at the invitation, I couldn't believe my eyes. The bride's name was none other than my daughter, Ruby Smith. "You're kidding, right? Is it a coincidence?" Just then, my phone rang. It was Jackson calling. "Hello, it's been a while. You doing okay? What do you want?" "Don't be so prickly. Ruby's getting married, so come to the wedding." "What are you talking about? I'm divorced and we're not a couple anymore." "Sorry, but I can't think of Ruby as my daughter." "What are you talking about?" "Just come, okay? I'll send the invitation to your parents' house." Jackson said that and hung up the phone. I had absolutely no intention of attending Ruby's wedding as the mother of the bride. However, I had told Harris that I would be there. Declining the invitation now would be rude. With that in mind, I decided to attend as the groom's boss. On the day of the wedding, 2 months later, I sat with my colleagues as a guest on the groom's side. The ceremony itself was private, with just the bride and groom, and guests would join for the reception. There was one empty seat in the family section. It seemed Jackson had not yet noticed me. The introductory movie for the bride and groom ended, and they started greeting each table. Harris came to my table, greeted me with joy, and thanked me for coming. Next to him, Ruby's face turned pale, her eyes wide in shock. Seeing this, Jackson's face also went pale, and he stormed over. "What is going on? Why are you sitting there?" he asked breathlessly. All eyes in the venue turned to us. Then Harris, having watched everything, asked curiously, "Excuse me, do you know Ms. Adams by any chance?" What if she's Rudy's mother? What? But I was told Rudy's mother abandoned the family and left. Oh, well, that's it seemed Jackson and Rudy had painted me as the villain in a convenience story they told Harris. As they stood there with guilty looks on their faces, I set the record straight. Harris, I'm sorry for not telling you the truth. I'm Ruby's mother, Miss Adams. Did you abandon Rudy and your husband? Is that true? That's not the case. I was treated like nothing more than a housekeeper by my husband and daughter, and ultimately I was ignored at home. Ignored, yes, it went on for a month, and I reached my breaking point. The divorce documents were already prepared by him, so I took them and left the house. It wasn't me who left, they rejected me outright. Hey Ruby, what's this about? Why did you ignore your mom? Then Ruby, losing her cute smile, retorted defiantly because everything about her was annoying. So I decided with Dad to ignore her. She left after just 1 month. That's hilarious, right, Ruby? Are you serious? It's fine. It won't bother you. Just think of me as not having a mother. Rudy managed to flash a smile again as if nothing had happened. In stark contrast, Harris's face was flushed with anger. What are you saying? This is no joke. I had no idea you were this kind of person. As Harris raised his voice in anger, Rudy, with rounded eyes, said, Huh. She probably never expected Harris to take my side. With a cold voice, Harris shook off Ruby's arm. This engagement is off. I'm glad I saw your true colors before we officially get married. What? Wait a minute. You're joking, right? Don't touch me. I don't ever want to speak with someone as mean as you again. The wedding is canceled. No way. Harris seized the microphone and apologized to the guests. I'm very sorry. He encouraged them to take their gifts back and head home. Wait a minute, everyone. Don't leave. Rudy cried out with tears. Everyone left the venue with cold stares. Just as I was about to follow them out, Jackson yelled at me, Hey, Natal, do something. He pleaded desperately. Huh, why should I? It's your fault, isn't it? You ruined Rudy's wedding, and you don't feel sorry about that. I burst out laughing. What's so funny? Jackson shouted angrily. I shot back just as fiercely. Well, I don't feel the slightest bit sorry for Ruby. After all, you two have brought it on yourselves. You deserve it. What about Ruby's marriage? He asked. I don't care, but I'm glad Harris, my valuable team member, doesn't have to marry such a scumbag. He deserves someone much better. So, goodbye. I won't see you ever again. With that, I left the venue without looking back. I felt a sense of clear relief wash over me. Later on, Harris and Ruby's engagement was called off. It turned out Ruby was originally a temp worker and seemed to have planned to quit her job for marriage. Without a job and dumped by her fiancé, Ruby began splurging on designer items due to stress. Now Jackson is desperately dipping into his savings to support Ruby. That kind of lifestyle couldn't last forever. The destruction of the two of them is clearly in sight. With this, I've shed those nagging feelings. From now on, I want to live life to the fullest, just for my own happiness.